Hello, everyone. I have a few remarks I would like to make about G.E. Moore's lecture, uh, Certainty. Um, First thing to keep in mind is that this is a lecture, so that he is speaking to other human beings who are in the same room with him. So the things that he says in the beginning of the lecture should be you should have that in your imagination. That is, it's not something that he's simply writing and sending off to the press, but it's something that he's in a shared experience in a room somewhere, um, talking to people. So the things that he starts out with, which in a certain respect, the whole essay is right there. They're very important, and in other respect, they're throwaways. They're not important at all. The the whole essay is right there in these, I think, 7 propositions that he makes, 7 assertions about things that he claims are true. That it's all right there because the whole essay is a defense of Moore's claim that he knows all these things, that he knows them for sure, that he knows them with certainty, and I think that by now we have some idea of what some of the philosophical objections might be to such a claim to know such things as he claims with certainty. But the whole point is his claiming that he does know these things, he knows them with certainty, and that he can meet the usual objections that philosophers of a more skeptical nature might make against his claim to know these things with certainty. But first, let's take a look at what I think there are 7, the 7 assertions that he makes in the beginning, just so we're clear about the kind of things that Moore is interested in defending our knowledge of. He starts his lecture this way. He says, "I am at present, as you can all see, in a room and not in the open air. I am standing up and not either sitting or lying down. I have clothes on and am not absolutely naked. I am speaking in a fairly loud voice and am not either singing or whispering or keeping quite silent. I have in my hand some sheets of paper with writing on them. There are a good many other people in the same room in which I am, and there are windows in that wall and a door in this one." And you can imagine Moore pointing in the direction of the walls that he's talking about. So there are the 7 propositions. Again, they're throwaways, and insofar as their content, he could have come up with 7 things that are completely different in terms of the truths that he's pointing out. We'll see that Moore is interested in the ways that they do express certain commonalities, and he says towards the end of the essay that these assertions, propositions that he's asserted to be true, are good test cases for a general theory, which turns out to be the theory that we can have knowledge of the external world in general, because all of them imply, in one way or another, the truth of an external world. So as we see later, if Moore can establish that he knows these things, and that he knows these things for sure, that is, knows them with certainty, then there are other, perhaps more interesting things that he could be said to have proven that he knows. For instance, that there is an external world in the first place, and that it's possible to know it. If that seems rather a ridiculous thing to try to establish, some philosophers would agree it's ridiculous to try to establish. It's obviously true that there's an external world. But we did begin this course by reading Bertrand Russell's opening chapter of The Problems of Philosophy, entitled Appearance and Reality, where he at least cast some doubt on our knowledge of that fundamental truth, that is, that there is a world external to me. He says, I think, something like, well, this shows that the external world, if there is one, or the external object, if there is one, is something quite mysterious, something like that. That is, Russell, at least in that chapter, seeks to throw some doubt on our the firmness with which we can assert that there is a world external to us, and therefore the firmness with which we can assert any truth about any object in that world. Now, I'm not saying that Moore has Russell in mind here, but he does have maybe the skeptic in mind, and the skeptic is the one who doubts the truth of the kind of things that Moore has started his lecture with, the truth of these common sense assertions about the external world and ourselves and our relation to it, and also about any the ultimate foundation of any claim to know such things. That is, that there is no claim. To get an idea, I think, of Moore's general goal in this lecture, let's look at page 258 in the first column. He says this: I do not think that I can be justly accused of dogmatism or overconfidence for having asserted these things positively, with assurance, it's positively true, in the way that I did. In the case of some kinds of assertions, under some circumstances, a man can be justly accused of dogmatism for asserting something positively. Dogmatism would just be holding on and insisting that a belief is true, despite a total lack of evidence or a lack of sufficient evidence. Moore is saying there's nothing dogmatic about my claim to know those first 7 assertions that I made and to know them with certainty. There's nothing dogmatic about it. What he wants to say is that there's good evidence that they're true. He continues, but in the case of assertions such as I made under the circumstances under which I made them, the charge of dogmatism, would be absurd. On the contrary, I should have been guilty of absurdity if, under the circumstances, I had not spoken positively about these things. For instance, he says, if he had said, well, instead of saying, I am standing up right now, he had rather qualified that, weakened the thing, and said, well, I think I'm standing up right now, but I don't know for certain. Under the circumstances he was when he made the assertion that he was standing up, that would be absurd. That is, to cast doubt on it, to pretend or to suggest that he does not know that and he does not know that for certain. That itself would be absurd. Now, he says there are maybe some very special circumstances in which one might say, I think I'm standing up, or I think I have clothes on, but I'm not sure. But they would be very special and unusual circumstances. Under normal circumstances, the true absurdity would be to suggest that maybe those things aren't true. I think what Moore wants to say is, no, those things are definitely true. I know them, and I know them fully, and I know them with certainty. Points out some other things that are common to, and this is, of course, important later on, that some of those assertions, not all of them, implied something about Moore's environment. They were assertions about his environment. They were assertions both about himself and about the place or environment that he's in. And one of the assertions about the door and the window being in those walls was solely about something in his environment, not about himself. And in fact, the fact that those doors and walls happened to be in his environment at the time were not important to the content of the assertions. They were assertions about the way that external objects in the world were that would be true without any reference to him. That is, that there is a door in that wall, that there is a window in that wall, are not dependent upon Moore's being in the same environment. So as we get through his sort of assertion that these are common sense propositions, and that we not only say that they're true, we know them, and we know that we know them, and we know that we know them with certainty, he then goes on to point out the first thing about them, which gets us into the more technical philosophical discussion of this lecture, which starts out in this very sort of common sense way. And that is that each one of these assertions, that I am standing up right now, I am clothed, not naked, I'm speaking in a fairly loud voice, there's a door in that wall and a window in that one, that every one of those assertions is true, but at the same time, every one of those assertions might have been false. That is, Moore admits that right away. That is, that each one of these things happens to be true, but each one of these assertions might, under just different circumstances, have turned out to be false. And that's where things start to get a little complicated and a little bit, well, frankly, more interesting.